Lillian, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Tell us a little bit about who you are and the work that you're doing.
Hey John, so I'm so excited to be here. So my name is Lillian Evans. My pronouns are she, her. I am currently the director of the Triandiflou Institute at SUNY Oswego. Been here for almost a year, starting in July. And I also am the CEO and founder of Just a Little Bit, which is a consulting company for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've been doing that work since 2022, as you can kind of see. My background is kind of this. So I have been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion my whole career in higher education for the last 9 years, which is wild to say. I'm in my mid-career, which is why. How did we get here? But we're here now. I started out doing diversity work with scholarship programs, moved into computer science as their diversity person and learned a lot there. I've been a dean of students and the director of our multicultural student affairs. So that's just a little bit about my background. Who I am as a person is way different sometimes.
Oh, tell me.
I think that, doing equity work is always exciting, but being authentic and being genuine is a part of the piece that I don't think we always get to do when we do this kind of work. And so I have learned how to be authentic in myself, in my workplace and who I am, and how to actually do racial justice and not just social justice, and also not just diversity, equity, inclusion. Like we have to center someone. And so I like to be the person that has to say the words and say the things that are needed in spaces. So I've been called a disruptor. I'm also a little wild. I also don't like to wear shoes. And my favorite color is purple. So that's kind of just a little bit about who I am as a person and kind of my career trajectory and where I've been.
I love it. I can't wait to get into the discussion and hear your perspective on some of these things. So, in your work, like in higher ed and in your consulting, like what have you noticed that's changed in the last few years regarding the expectations that people have from their either workplace or their institution, their school?
I think what I've noticed is that we have gotten into this place of we want everyone to come to their authentic self.
Okay.
And then we want people to feel belonging, right? That is our big word right now. Belonging, belongingness, which is not a word, but who am I? Uh, but
It
as
is now.
but I really want people to kind of think about and talk about what does it mean to have community in places. We want people to be their authentic self, but like that sometimes doesn't always fit in the communities in which we're trying to make it our institutions and our jobs. Because we also kind of want assimilation in the same respect. So we want people to be authentic, but we want you to be authentic in the way that we have deemed acceptable. And I think in the past few years, what I'm hearing of for younger folks, and so you have the younger folks and you got the boomers in the same workforce, that there is a different kind of standard that's kind of going on with who people are coming to work as. Folks want to come to work as their authentic self. They want to be able to kind of be messy and not quote unquote professional of what that means. And then you have the boomers that are like, this is how we do things. And so between those two folks, I think that we've tried to get this whole belonging piece, but whose belonging is being centered, number one. And then what does it look like if someone doesn't belong? If I don't belong, does it mean that I can't thrive? And I think that that's the issue that I kind of hear when I hear we want everyone to belong here. And it's like I don't necessarily need to belong to thrive, but I need to find my people, my tribe, my community in order to have someone that I can go to and be like, what are you talking? I can't do this. I'm really overwhelmed. But I also need to have the people that I like can bounce ideas off of and I can see myself in. That may not make me feel that I belong at the whole industry level, but I do have a tribe in order to thrive in this company.
I really like the way that you frame that. And the authenticity piece is important. And I feel like I've noticed a shift where we used to hear bring your whole self to work. And now we hear bring your authentic self at work. And I'm hearing this in the way that you explained it is kind of like nobody brings their whole self to work, right? And nobody wants to. But there are elements, and it's potentially different for everyone
Mhm.
what that is. And you mentioned some tensions between like the older generation and the younger generation. What type of interventions do you do to try to bridge that gap of the expectations or to develop the norms that
Mhm.
are now considered that part of what we need is for you to assimilate and be authentic.
Right. I think that as I think about it, that fellowship goes into a big piece of that, right?
Tell me what you mean by that. Fellowship.
I come from church, right? So food and fellowship was our bread and butter. You have church service, you get after church and you're eating with people, you're talking with them. And that,
Breaking bread, right?
yes, literally, like that is literally how I was able to kind of understand generationally when I was younger, right? You had older people, you got them drinks, you had conversation with them, you heard them. I think that there has to be more of that fellowship piece in our workspaces and in our institutions so that people can have conversations over food. It is really a natural kind of way to kind of bridge that gap. I think also we have to be intentional about what are our actual expectations, because I think sometimes we have a vision of an expectation and then we have what people are actually doing. And that disconnect in the generations, I think, is also a big piece of that when we think about who people are and who people are coming as. So if I have that when you come to work, you work from 9 to 5, you leave your personal life at home. I don't need to know about your kids or anything. But then someone else comes in that's like, guess what I did last night, right? And so those two visions of what a workplace looked like are fighting with each other. And so I think that sometimes our administrators and our supervisors, our people, the people that are peopling us, right, need to kind of talk about what are our expectations in this space, and we need to create norms in our workspaces. And we need to be explicit about that. And when someone else comes in, we have to also take into account what they're saying for their normative of their workspace. I think sometimes we want, well, a lot of the time, we just want people to kind of come in and we onboard them about what they need to do the job, but we don't onboard them about what is the culture of the place that they're at. And those conversations don't happen enough. So it's number one, breaking down the barrier between the generations and having some intentional conversations and spaces, but also to name the thing. Like we have to name what our normatives are. We have to name the culture. And if you want to change the culture, that's fine, but you have to first name what it is.
That sounds really clear and direct, but also really challenging to do, right?
Yeah.
What would you say to like leaders that are maybe not quite boomer, but someone like me, Gen X, who's had kind of both feet, in these different expectations for work? What advice would you give, or what guidance would you give to set appropriate, healthy personal boundaries
Right.
on what I bring to work and what I leave?
So I think that like what I've kind of done with like students, so I've supervised people, but like students are my bread and butter, and I have learned how to kind of create those conversations with people. So I think the first thing to do is to understand who you are as a person and as a leader. What are your normatives? What are your expectations? I know for me, I am very like lackadaisical. So like I want to build a relationship with people and I want to know the stories. I will not remember your name. I'm just gonna be honest, but I
Okay.
will remember stories about you, where you grew up, what have you done? And so I had to first be honest with myself of like, Lillian, who are you as a person, right? And who do I show up at to work as? Because sometimes I think we're showing up one way, but other people aren't seeing us the same way. So you have to also ask the people who you work with who you are as well, because those things kind of differ. So I think number one, it's thinking about who am I as a person, and what do I want the space to look like that I want to work in. And I think also there has to be a point where the leaders have to look and understand who works with them. I'm very intentional about knowing my staff and my students of like, I treat people the way they want to be treated. So I'm a hugger. I hug everyone. That's just my thing. But I know that not everyone is like that. And so I can watch and take into account of the people who are in my space. And so I treat them the way that they've kind of shown up in my space as well. And so when we're talking about creating normatives, you have to know who's in your space. And are you creating normatives that is so outside of people's innate nature that this will be way harder than you would ever imagine? Or are you thinking about creating normatives that kind of already fall into the flow of the people that you work with? But you have to know who those people are. So spending time with people, having those conversations. Um, And then taking that, what you've learned about yourself, what you've learned about your environment, and taking that to the group of saying, like, hey, y'all, this is what I've noticed. And this is where I kind of see us going. When I started in my current position, I asked my staff, like, how do you process, right? Would you rather me send you an email and give you time to process, or are you okay with me popping in and out? And I was like, but I'm the person, I'm going to just be like, hey, you got a minute? And know you have 20 because that's just who I am. So I was honest with them with that. And they were like, we would love for you to send an email so we can process. So the way that I do it now is I send an email, I wait 10 minutes, and then I go to their office. So it has to work for both
Yeah.
people on both sides, right? And so asking that question and learning your staff in a way that's helpful, and then creating the normatives based off of what you've learned about them and what they're actually asking for. And then what is the good of the company, right? We know that we need to retain good talent and we can't keep recruiting people, right? We know that it costs more to recruit than just retain. So what kind of environments are we creating? So leaders need to kind of think about who they are, what they want to do, the people that they're with, and then having the conversation in a group where everyone has access to the table and access to be heard. So we have to be inclusive also when we bring this group together. Don't brush people off. Allow different styles to be put into that meeting. Allow people to send a message that's maybe anonymous or write something down, or allow folks to talk it out. So you have to make sure that you're thinking of all styles when you're thinking about these meetings and these normatives.
I see a lot of challenges and in that. I mean, definitely on board with all of that, and I like what it would do to get there. How would you handle? And in my experience, I've run up against this, but leaders who feel like this type of work, maybe the
Mhm.
work around emotions or that skill of being able to read the room, right, and remain open with all of the external pressures to meet your KPIs or all of your duties, how would you approach someone that feels like this work takes too much time and gets in the way of actually doing the real work?
I'm gonna be honest, it takes a lot of time. It does take a lot of time, right? But I think that that's how you build your team too. Like, I am not the business person. Like, if you're like, how much money do we have left? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just spent it. Like, so I have to also have people around me. So I'm the people person. My best friend calls it the Lillian effect. If you give me time, there'll be people around us all the time. And so I know that about myself, but I know that my staff is a little more introverted. So finding times to say like, hey, let's close this part, let's close the center and have times that we are really intentional about our workspace and having to be intentional about what we need to produce. Also creating times where you are working together, that we can kind of get things done. What we think is sometimes is we think that people should just go to their computers, stare at the computer, and just do the thing, right? That's not real. And I think that we really learned that during COVID is because I remember like the first few months of COVID that I was like, I have to sit at my computer for 8 hours a day. And when I really thought about it, there was no I was ever spending 8 hours at my computer when I was at work, right? You're going to the bathroom, you're having the pop-up meetings, you're having the conversation. You may be going on a walk with someone, and having meetings. But when we kind of sat and during COVID and we had to stare at the screen for 8 hours, we realized that that really wasn't doable, right? Like we never, I think as a society, we've never necessarily worked 8 hours unless you're maybe at a factory, right? So like you were never sitting there like, I'm going to do this assignment, then this assignment, then this assignment, get up from my lunch at 12 o'clock, sit back down at 1, and then keep going. That has never been kind of our workspaces. And I think that with COVID, I would hope people notice that, but I don't think some people did. And so now they're thinking that like productivity needs to be higher as we're coming back into spaces. And no, because when you really think about it, productivity is going to either stay the same or maybe even go down just because we are in the peopling of people again, right? We are in those spaces where we are able to create and to learn and to thrive together, which is maybe causing productivity to look different, right? And I think that that's the other thing of like, what does it look like and what do we want it to look like? At the end of the day, I have to get so many things on my to-do list done, right? But
Right.
Does that mean that I have to do that by myself? Does that mean that my staff have to do that by themselves? Does that mean that I need to see them in their office sitting down and working? Or do I create collaborative spaces for them? So both of the things are hard, but also creating a team that can do the thing that you're just not good at and can help you with that is also really important too. Um, as we talk about equity, right? Equity is giving people what they need, not giving people what you want or giving everyone the same. So we're not doing equality anymore. We're trying to do that equity piece.
Right.
And so it does take time to know what people's equity looks like in your space.
Yeah, you would need to get to know somebody to understand what they need to get to the same starting line as a lot of people, right? Or uh, envisioning that graphic of people looking over the fence and somebody's short, somebody can see over it, and making sure that they have equal access to the same experience. Um, Man, you took me back when you started mentioning COVID, and there were so many things that I think changed and impacted us. And it seems like the focus on well-being has
Mhm.
become more important in the workplace. Um, what do you think are the tie-ins to the equity work and well-being, and what can workplaces do to not just like, oh, hey, here's your journal, your gratitude journal, you better be well now, but like to get meaningful like well-being
Mhm.
to like stick in the workplace?
Um, I think number one, we have to define what that looks like in different workspaces. What works in maybe a Fortune 500 company is not going to work in higher education. So we have to define what does that mean. And during COVID, I think that we sometimes had a good spot where we could like do a meeting, put our laundry in the load, right? Do a meeting, maybe do some gardening in between.
Help your kids with their homework. Yeah.
Yes, right. Like take the dog for a walk. And I think that as we're coming back into brick and mortar buildings, is that what we're finding is that that 2-day weekend is actually not enough to do life.
Mm,
And doing life is a part of well-being. And I think that's the part that we have to think about of like, what does it mean for our staff to do life? And do it well and not just do work. There, I think that, in the United States, we've had a lot of like hustle culture. And
yeah.
it's like, just keep going, do the next thing. What's next? But if we really stopped and looked at well-being, it's not what's next, it's where are we now? And how do we allow people to have that time of where are we now? So I think that what that kind of looks like, and I kind of talked about that today, is that I even had to ask myself of like, what do I want to feel like and look like in the future? And so what does that mean for now? So, all of the people that do workouts are like, you're gonna have to pick and choose like what your sacrifice is, right? And I think companies are gonna have to pick and choose what is their sacrifice. Do you want people who have are healthy emotionally and mentally to be in your workspaces, or do you want everyone who is burnt out and overwhelmed and filled in with anxiety to be in your workspaces? Because that either way has a consequence, right? And
Yeah.
they may be productive, but the whole office may feel so heavy that people are leaving left and right because it is just unattainable to be in this space. And so when we think about well-being, we have to think about space. We have to think about mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual, which a lot of people kind of like want to do separated church and state. But when you
Mm.
think about a whole person is a part of that. Well-being has spirituality as a part of it. And we don't get to pick and choose what parts of people we want. We have to get the whole person. And so go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was gonna ask, as we want to create places where people can be well, they could innovate, they could be creative, they don't have to love everybody, but they have to, respectfully work with folks and try to do this. And knowing that diversity and equity, inclusion, like conflict is going to happen when you have differences in ideas. And this all feels like kind of related. But I'm wondering when you ask people like what they need
Mhm.
to be well at work or what they need in the face of having to maybe either change or understand that the impact of what they're doing is different than what they thought, right? Or what they intended. Um, how do you equip people to answer that question? Or do you find that people have what they need to know the answer to those questions?
So I think that when I like talk to my students, they don't know. I'm like, what
Okay.
do you need? How can I support you? And I think sometimes we think that if we ask the question, people will give us an answer. And I that doesn't always happen. Even for myself and my friends are like, I'm like, I'm gonna crash out, right? Like the kids say, and it's just I'm overexerted. I have all this anxiety, I'm overwhelmed. And someone asks me what I need, I don't know what that is.
You can easily identify what you don't need.
Yes, right? Like it's like when someone asks you, like, what do you want for dinner? I don't know. And they're like, tacos. I don't want that.
No, not
I
talking.
know that I don't want that.
Yeah, yeah. This is a argument that my husband and I get into often.
Yes.
Oh, I don't care, but then you kind of do care.
Yeah,
So
you do.
yeah, so I think, definitely knowing that it's not working when it's happening, that's easy.
Yes.
But any uh tips or work that you've done that help people, I don't know, is it language? Is it the skills around understanding what they need to be, feel like they belong or to just be
Yeah.
what they need to be at work?
So I think that number one, I've allowed people to kind of do some self-reflection, right? I've done, and you can find this on the internet, it's called the I Am poem. And
Huh?
it is a poem that kind of you get to define who you are. So when we're in the workspace, I have people put I am an educator. And then it asks you a series of questions of what does that mean to be an educator? And when people do that, it kind of allows them to kind of sit back and think about why they're in this work. Why are they here? What's the purpose of it? And so allowing people to figure out who they are in their workspace, right? And who they want to be, then we can kind of talk about what does that look like sustainability wise? How do you do this for a long time? So you ask people of like, what are their values, right? Sometimes I think that we don't think about our values. We think more about who we are as a person, our characteristics, but are our values being aligned at work? So taking time for people to kind of understand their values and who they are. So number one, who they are as a professional, what are their values as a human, and then taking that time to kind of say that like where what environment do we have here? And I think sometimes if we take the time to compare the two and we see the discrepancies, we can then fill in the gap of what is not there for folks. And what is our larger group kind of feeling.
So, like a company, I feel like expresses its values through like a mission
Mhm.
statement. Um, how does that mission like shape the workplace? How do you know if you're getting it right or not?
So I think a lot of people have mission statements, right? And they even have diversity, equity, and inclusion statements, but nobody says what do those words mean and how do you live those out,
They
right?
sound good, yeah.
Yeah, like we wordsmith everything.
Right, or even like the executives, like who are relationship people already, they can speak to it. But then you go down to like everyone else
Mhm.
and the next level down, they're like, I wasn't part of that discussion, but I guess I have to do it. I might align, I might not. Like, how
Mhm.
do you handle that?
So I think that we have to also understand that like unfortunately the trickle down effect doesn't actually work, right?
In
Um
economics, that's for sure. But what do
yes,
you mean by that in this context?
in the context of if the executive suite knows what your values are, but if you get down to the people that are maybe working in your facility staff and they don't,
Mhm.
where is the disconnect? And the question is that you haven't brought these people to the table to know the mission and vision and the values of this company. And people think that they also are not necessarily putting them out there when they're having these interviews either, right? We're asking questions that are technical, but we're not asking people who they are as a person and what does our mission align with who you are as a person. And that is also, I think, where a lot of the dissonance comes in too, is that we get these jobs and we don't actually know what they stand for, right? We like the salary, we know how to do the work, but we haven't sat down and been like, oh, what you believe is not what I believe as a person. And so I don't think I can thrive here. But then also, our companies haven't said, who is this person as a person? And do they even know our mission and our values? And are we living those out? And so, if you tell me that your value is um well-being, right? And then I see that none of your staff are well, right?
They're all
I'm
stressed out
like,
and burned out.
right?
Yeah,
Everyone is just stressed, and it's like, but you're not living out your values. And so both of those questions I think have to be asked at the beginning when someone starts, but even pre the recruitment
right.
phase and all the way throughout. And so we have to do check-ins also.
I feel like that's a fast track to an organization losing trust. If the mission is solid, but then you don't see it. And even if you see it in other places, but there could be one interaction that then makes you realize, like, oh, it's going to be hard for me to thrive here.
Yeah. And if you only see it at the C-suite level, then it is not a mission of the institution or the place.
Right.
It's the
Feels a little
mission,
performative sometimes.
yes. And
Yeah.
it's a mission of a few people, maybe, right? And I think there are times when we don't like to change mission statements. Like, we've had this mission statement since 1985, and it's like, well, in 2025, what does that look like today?
A lot has happened yeah, since
Yes.
then.
And so we also have to be flexible in what we see are our values and mission and how we change that and the policies and practices that we have. We have to be willing to be flexible to change language, to change situation, and still stick to who we are, but like do the words still are still believable in 2025. And if we're not doing that, that's okay to say we need to try something else.
You called yourself a disruptor when you introduced yourself a little bit. There are so many things that can disrupt the workplace culture, right? We've got AI coming up. Who knows externally what the political climate may bring? Natural disasters are hitting folks in so many different ways. Taking all of that into account, is there anything that you would suggest to a company that would future-proof them for any of those situations?
I'd probably be a lot richer, but
If you had that answer, yes, amen, me too.
but I think that as we are going through the world right now, is that we have to understand that we have to plan for the world not to be the way we've known it. And that was true of COVID. That's been true of all these natural disasters. And so we can't plan for the way that we used to plan 10 years ago. We used to be able to come up with 10-year plans, right? And like kind of stick to them and be like, look at that. That's amazing. No, I'm pretty sure we're at like 2 to 3 years tops when we're planning,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
10 years, stuff changes in 10 minutes these days,
Yes.
you know?
And so we're not in the same world. And so understanding that we have to keep planning and replanning. But I also think that we also have to take into account of the humans in which that work for us. They are not the same humans of our grandparents, right?
Mm.
They're not staying with companies for 30, 50 years. They're not retiring from companies. And a lot of stuff is happening to them that is external. And so with the external, we have to understand that the internal will be affected. We are not of the generation that left all the stuff at home, came to work and was a perfect worker, and then was like, okay, I'm a robot, and then go home and like crash, right?
Yeah, I put air quotes around that perfect
Yes.
worker, but yeah,
Right.
no, we are definitely not, and things are changing rapidly. I wish we had more time to dive into all of these things, but I really want to thank you for your insights and for this conversation today and making time to come on the show.
Thank you so much. I had a great time, John.